Welcome, everyone, to our November webinar on the questions a seeker might ask. I got into this topic in a kind of backward way. I was finding myself very concerned about a number of folks who I know who have, shall we say, drifted away from the path of a seeker, and they're basically just out enjoying and living their lives, and kind of saying to themselves and to anyone who asks, such as me, what they're saying to themselves is, I just want to live my life. I don't want to have to deal with trying to be better, trying to make spiritual progress, trying to evolve. um, Life is as it is, and I'm just going to live it. And I was really struck by that. I thought there must be something that's going on in them that has turned them off to spiritual seeking. And it struck me as I was thinking about that, that there must be some questions that these people really aren't asking anymore. And it must be that they weren't feeling like the promise of enlightenment, the promise of fulfillment, of bliss consciousness was sufficient to motivate them. It was seemed too the goal seemed too remote and too difficult to attain. And so, the feeling was, why would I give up having a happy life? And that's literally, I think, what they were thinking. Why should I give up my happiness for spiritual evolution for something that maybe I'll get later, but which I'm not really enjoying all that much right now? And I thought, that's kind of a legitimate point of view if you think about it. I think a person can honestly say that to themselves and have some questions. And so it struck me that even though the people that usually attend this webinar are pretty much devoted to their evolution, they really believe in it, that probably even they have occasionally some doubts, some questions that maybe they just can't really answer completely at the time. And so they find themselves kind of going on what we call faith. Faith that it's all going to work out, everything's going to be okay, and that you know we will get enlightened someday, and it's okay if we're not enlightened now. I don't really believe that, actually. Of course, I think experience confirms that we're making progress. And that's certainly very much what Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's program has been, to not just have understanding and not just understand what enlightenment would be someday, but to realize that one is having experience today, and to realize how to know that it's valid experience. And for at least a few folks, regular participation in what are actually daily conference calls. Um, I guess it's 5 days, 4 or 5 days a week. Yeah, that they're live, and then the other days recordings of Maharshi are offered. But there's a daily program to validate experience, and in hearing other people present their experiences, we discover many times that we ourselves are actually having good experiences, experiences that indicate a development of higher states of consciousness, of enlightenment. And so, what I wanted to do tonight was to go through some questions that I wrote out. And I'm afraid the list has gotten fairly long, and I kind of doubt we're going to get through all the questions, but it probably doesn't matter. The key thing is to ask and to answer and to explore that. And then in our group clearing session that'll follow my presentation, we'll actually go into that on an individual basis, all at the same time, and test, so to speak, in ourselves that we know where we're at, or discover where we don't know, and then perhaps to find the answers. to the questions that may come up. So let me start with that list because I had a lot of fun writing it out. It was one of those things that I'd get a few of the questions at one time, and then I'd, and write them down, and then I'd leave, and then maybe, in the rest period after meditation, or when I wake up in the morning, or when I go to bed at night, excuse me, or if there was some pause in the day, I might suddenly have, another two or three questions pop into my head. So we developed quite a list. So I'm going to put my glasses on if my headpiece will allow. There, we got that. Excuse me. The first question I put down, I think, is kind of an interesting one. The question was, have I been here before? And what it relates to is the sense of knowing that this moment and all moments, although they're unique in themselves, they represent experience is a continuum rather than something that just is in this lifetime. And so the question, have I been here before? I also came up with that question because I've been babysitting my 1-year-old granddaughter and wondering if she has recollection of past lives. And one of the reasons I wonder about that on a real basis is that she shows unusual interest, or a great deal of interest, probably a better way to say that, a great deal of interest in certain things. And one of them, one of her favorite things, is a Chinese drawing of a water buffalo and a boy who is tending the buffalo, um, sitting on its back, playing the flute, and holding or having next to him just a small rope that attaches to the water buffalo's nose ring. And it's a very striking thing to see. It's a beautiful drawing. It's extremely well done, extremely simple. There really is no background. It's just this kind of rough sketch of a water buffalo. It's very recognizable, but not a lot of detail. And then this similarly rough sketch of a boy on his back, small boy at that. Um, and it implies that here's this great fierce beast being tended by a very small child, and that there has to be this kind of relationship between the two of them. And here's this boy sitting on the water buffalo's back. He looks very small up there, and he's playing the flute. And my granddaughter absolutely loves that picture. And you go like, 1 years old. How could she possibly appreciate art, the subtleties of art and understand what it is? There is something about that picture. So I keep asking her, do you remember that? And she looks at me with these big eyes that she has, she has a very intense gaze. And she looks back at the picture and points at it. And she likes to touch it's covered in glass, but she likes to touch the print. And then she'll look back at me, and it's like she's telling me this is familiar. So the question, have I been here before, uh, is both an intellectual exercise and then prompted by this experience that here is this 1-year-old child who gives indication. There's some other things that she does too. They give indication that she remembers prior experience, and that there's something fascinating about what she's seeing today that evokes some memory within her. So the question, of course, when we ask, have I been here before? It's about shifting our awareness from the day to day experience to seeing our life as a continuum of existence through many lifetimes and present time, and then into the future, what that future might possibly hold for us. And when we start asking that question, what might the future hold, we get to a question that I think is very profound, which is, what lessons am I here to learn? What kinds of challenges am I going to face that will push me to be a bigger person, a more comprehensive person, a more understanding person, um, a person with greater interpersonal capabilities and personal capabilities. And so I think that's a wonderful, wonderful question. What lessons am I here to learn? I've heard tell, I haven't had the direct experience myself, but I've heard tell that when we choose to incarnate, I'm not even sure that we really, it's up to us, but I have a feeling, really, my gut feeling is that we get pushed into incarnating. But that when that happens, that we get certain assignments, whether they're assigned externally or they're just our desire. It's like, oh, I need to be more competent with finances. I need to be able to make more money and handle money better. So that might be a desire, you might say, or a goal for our life. It might be a lesson that we need to learn. Or maybe it's, that I need to learn how to be a leader, or a follower for that matter, or any other aspect of life that we could embody. And so, most of us find, and if you look in astrological charts, it will often give indication of what kinds of things you're going to be confronted with, challenged by in this lifetime that you have to learn how to navigate. So all of us seem to have some of those things, and each of us has our own. It's answering that question: what lessons am I here to learn? And you can think back on, well, what have I learned? What kinds of situations have I found myself in? Maybe I was in physical danger. Maybe I was an outcast in the family, or carried a great weight in a family, even as a child. Different situations that we may have found ourselves in. Maybe we were poor at some point, very poor, and going hungry. What kinds of challenges did I face, and how did I come out? Am I able to live as a integrated and humble human being in the face of the challenges that we confront us in the world, and in our lives? And then related to that, but a little bit different, is, have I realized what my dharma is? Dharma is life purpose. It's kind of the big goals of life, the big plan. Clearly, my dharma is to be a healer, and that manifested in many different ways, actually, through my life. But certainly as a doctor, and now as a healer in the more alternative sense of that, and doing energy healing particularly, which is really special stuff, and I enjoy it very much. So my dharma is very clear, but I also have a dharma as a parent, and that's another very big dharma. And now I've been taking on a dharma of grandparent and enjoying that also very much. Um, and then there may be other dharmas, and each of us has our own dharma. So it's not just our profession, but it could be our avocations, and then our roles in life. And so most of us have multiple dharmas, as it were. And um, living our dharma seems to be an extremely important thing. And not living our dharma, particularly when we make bad choices. It's one thing to say, well, I should have been a musician, but I just never had the opportunity, or I didn't know how I could make any money at it. And those are, real things that we confront in our lives. Um, but sometimes, we're not able to live our dharma, or it may be that we have a dharma for a certain part of our life, and then it changes into something else. We have some different dharma. So all of those things are possible. And they're valuable questions to ask, because dharma helps us uphold evolution in our time on earth. And if we are out of dharma, people use the word adharma, or things, activities that are adharmic, that may be counter to our evolution, may actually set us back. So living our dharma is extremely important. Um, and then we get down into the real questions of spiritual evolution. Have I thought about consciousness beyond, meaning transcendental to, thinking? Just the consciousness that's beyond thinking, that underlies thinking. About the possibility that everything is really nothing. It's no thing. It's all just consciousness. And of course, physics tells us it's all just a field of natural law, a field of or a quantum mechanical field. And it really isn't what we see. That's just the manifestation of it on our senses. But it's all just waves of consciousness, waves of the unified field of natural law, vibrating according to certain rules, laws of nature. Have we really realized that? Part of that is intellectual, but part of that is experiential. And that's really part of the key of recognizing our evolution when we no longer are bound to this body and all our stuff, physical objects, but we realize it is consciousness. And we see that ocean of consciousness in motion, and we are a part of that. And it's not just here, our body. Part of that question is, what does it mean to be woke, awakened? People use the word woke now. I think it's very, very charming. Am I woke? Have I awakened? And what does that mean? What does that mean to us? And what does it mean to others? So, is my concept of that in harmony with what others have described as part of evolution? To be more awake, more aware of all the aspects of life, not just the material aspects, but the energy that moves and guides and directs us and takes us in this direction or that direction, or brings us this experience or some other experience. And then we get down to the fundamental question that I started with, really, which is, what questions do I have about furthering my spiritual journey? Here I am. I've done many things. I've evolved. I can see some of the things that have indicators of, achieving more consciousness, more being more woke. But what more do I need to do? Valuable question, a valuable question. Am I really doing what I should be doing or need to be doing to evolve and know that it is the right thing for me at this time? That's a very, very critical point. And then another question I came up with, which is not my own. Why do bad things happen to seemingly good people like me? And anybody who knows me knows that I've been going through some stuff lately. Things that most people would say are bad. Bad is a judgment. Good is also a judgment. And so kind of it is the exercise of, can I transcend the notion, actually transcend the notion of good and bad, of judgment. I want this, I don't want that. I like this is painful. Can we get past that and just be, and just accept what comes to us? Oh, here is this thing. I have to deal with that. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just something to deal with. So that question is a very interesting one, and it relates to the earlier questions about, what am I here to learn? And so, and of course, there is the fundamental concept of karma, or what I call the first step of karma, which is the things that come back to us as a consequence of our previous actions. And sometimes they come back really fast, and sometimes they come back from, well, frankly, in my work, I can see them coming back from past lives, and oftentimes through multiple incarnations or multiple generations of a family. It can be both. And so the question, why do bad things happen to seemingly good people? We're kind of okay when bad things happen to bad people, but when we have good people, in my field of medicine, one of the realizations, and I've not seen it statistically analyzed, but one of the things that many doctors are aware of is that really nice people are the ones that get cancer. It's like kind of nasty people don't get cancer. They get other things, but they don't get cancer. It's like nice people get cancer, good people get cancer. And so that becomes a real question. Why does this good person, many of whom may be either good spiritual seekers in sense that we've been talking, or perhaps they're just people who have been, active in their church and helpful, making contributions and donations of time and often money. Um, why is that happening? So it's a very interesting question. And when something happens to you that you go like, oh, good, I really wish this wasn't happening. You go like, oh, what is this about? What am I supposed to learn in this experience? It's very helpful, actually. Um, we've been talking, and maybe this question is redundant, but what is it that I'm seeking on my spiritual path? What is it I'm seeking? What am I looking for? What is it I really want? And all too often that evolves into a story about our life and what we need, and gets very materialistic. Um, and it can involve social things, but the idea is it's all about the gross level of life, and but if we think about it in terms of consciousness, in terms of spiritual evolution, what is it I really want? What do I expect? Maybe that's the better question. Not what am I seeking, but what is it I expect? What is it I expect to gain by following one path or another? And we can then ask, what teachers have I encountered? And they're not necessarily spiritual teachers, just people who have some wisdom or some insight, or just their maturity, just the opportunity to work around them. I've had so many in my life. It's really a wonderful thing. To a considerable extent, I regard my own father as one of the greatest teachers that I had. He was a tremendous example, um, and I felt he was a very wise man, and definitely worthy of thinking about what he had to say. And then we can ask, what have these teachers contributed to my evolution? How did they help expand my capacity to think about how can I be a bigger person? How can I be a more evolved person? I think we've already kind of asked, what does self-realization mean to me? It's a very personal question. What is it? We can listen to teachings of enlightened masters, or supposedly enlightened masters, and you know other supposedly wise people. Um, but but what does it mean to me? What do I understand enlightenment, self-realization to be? Self-realization is a very specific term, right? In Vedic science, it means the realization of the self, and usually written with a capital S to indicate that self which is not a- identified with specific objects in the material world, including our own body. It's that self that is transcendental to that. And so self realization means becoming aware of that self so that we can be self reflective. We know that the self knows the self by itself, Marshy said. So, what does self realization mean in real practical terms? Like, what is that experience to me? And how clear, you might say, is that experience? Um, and having gained all of these things, we can say, what experience have I had that validate the possibilities beyond what is commonly experienced? How do I know it's true? I put that question in there because I was very reluctant as a science oriented person to enter the world of spiritual seeking. And practically everybody I knew had taken up the practice of transcendental meditation. And I knew a great deal about it, but I had absolutely no experience. So even though I intellectually understood what was being offered and I understood the practice of the technique, I knew what it was, I knew the concept of transcending intellectually, having heard introductory presentations on it innumerable times from family and friends. Um, I was finally dragged, as I often have said, kicking and screaming into the initiation room, into the room where I was to be taught. Um, and it was as if nature was drawing back the bow to shoot the arrow, and it had to pull it really far back to prepare me for that. But the outcome was that when I was taught transcendental meditation, it was like I confirmed in that, I'm going to say moment, it's a couple of minutes. Um, confirmed in that few minutes that basically everything I had been told was absolutely true. That there was this bliss in this subtle level of awareness I understood transcending. So, I went like, yeah, this is it. This is real meditation. This is really accomplishing what it's supposed to be, and it's just as simple as they say. So, experiences that validate the possibility that consciousness is not just our awareness, but it's global awareness, it's cosmic awareness, and so on and so forth. So many different ways of saying that. But what experiences have I had? And again, this is why having the opportunity to attend the program that Maharshi has provided, where we hear each other's experiences and we hear Maharshi talking about experiences, really confirms, it gives us validation over and over and over again of what real experience of higher states of consciousness is. I'm thinking to skip a few of these questions here because it's getting late. Um, we've already talked about validation of experiences. Have I thought about why the universe was created? Though that's one of those cosmic questions that philosophers kind of like to ponder, and many individuals do too. Why was the university created, and why am I here? What's this all about? Um, and then similarly, have I realized that I'm just a speck in the universe? I'm just this little tiny thing, like an atom in a grape. There's millions and billions of atoms in a grape. I'm just this one atom. I'm just this one little speck in the universe. I had that experience very profoundly when I was in high school. I used to sneak under the fence from where I lived and cross the golf course in the center of the west part of Des Moines, um, and go into the center of the golf course where the Drake University Observatory was located. They've since had to move it because the city grew up so much. There's so much light, you can't see anything from that location anymore, and that's a great misfortune, as it were. But when that thing was built about 100 years ago, it was pretty dark out there. It was very nice. Anyway, I used to go to the observatory on Friday nights, and astronomy professor Riggs, I believe his name was, would give a lecture, just like I'm doing now. And then we would go up into the dome and look through the telescope. And it was a refracting telescope, not without a mirror, just a set of lenses, but a very big one. I believe it was the second largest one in North America. It's a very big telescope. It's actually a very good one. But very old. The mechanisms today and the things that they can do with telescopes are far, far beyond what that one was capable of. But still, it was capable of some very good experience. And what that did, I went many, many, many times. And what that did was to show me that I am just this little speck, and there are all these, galaxies out there. We would look at galaxies and nebulae and, all kinds of phenomenon in the sky. Such as was known 60 years ago. And boy, that was some time ago. Yeah, it was about 60 years ago. And it really brought home to me that I was very, very small. And the other thing that it did, it quite convinced me, even though there was no lecture about it, that there was absolutely no reason to believe that Earth was the only planet that had intelligent life on it. Not just life, but intelligent life. Because the universe was so enormous and there were so many galaxies, all of them with stars, in the hundreds of millions, like our galaxy. And so it was likely, even in our galaxy, that there would be a planet with intelligent life. And virtually certain that in all the 100 billion galaxies that are out there, some vast number, I don't remember, um, that, with all the hundreds of billions of stars, there really had to be intelligent life out there. And it was very likely that it was more evolved, more advanced in terms of its development of technology and everything than our society was. So that kind of thing, what was a background experience to being a seeker, because it was very clear when you realize how big the universe is that we're not really going to accomplish an awful lot by rocket ships. We've had a lot of movies about space travel, and most of it, although, we did get to the point where we envisioned faster than light travel. But, many of the movies, it just understood we could only go so fast. And so exploring the universe really wasn't, and I understood this as a kid, that exploring the universe physically wasn't really going to work, that we had to be able to teleport our intelligence to other locations in order to really explore and live in the universe. So that was one of the experiences that made me a seeker, because I had no idea what that actually meant, but the idea was there. And then finally, I can't end this without getting onto one of my favorite topics, and I think probably a topic that's at least sometimes on all of our minds, and that is, what is God? How can I know God? Is this even a meaningful question? Many people would say it is not, of course. Um, and even in my upbringing, it was like, we really don't talk about God. I mean, in my religious upbringing, we really can't talk about God. We can't really know God. We can only serve and be act justly and humanely to our fellow men. And it wasn't a bad teaching, but on the other hand, it was discouraging. And frankly, I didn't believe that. I thought if religion was to be worth anything, since it talked about God, it ought to be able to give us the experience of God. We ought to be able to know God. And so each of us hopefully has found some way to evolve in that direction. Um, I just recently took Raja Ram's Maharaja's course on the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, as translated and commented on by Maharshi. And it's a great deal of it is knowing God. And it was a fascinating, fascinating course. Um, it wasn't full of ideas that I hadn't heard before, but it was nice to have them all packaged up together along with the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. So I commend that course to anyone who might want to take it next time it's offered. So with that, I think I'd like to bring this presentation to a close with just this notion that it's okay to ask questions, but when we stop asking the questions really and stop seeking, we're kind of wasting time. We're wasting a life that could be devoted to much, much more. And so I would commend to people that they look very, very carefully at their experience and their intellectual understanding, and look out for areas where maybe some cynicism has crept in, or the sense that, well, I'm just going to do these things for evolution, and I'm not really going to live my life. I'm just going to be very careful, and I'm going to kind of isolate myself and just have a very pure life, and I'm going to do all the rituals or whatever that we think that are valuable. um, and kind of, it's called spiritual bypassing. And I don't want to point any fingers, but it means that we're not real. We're making a mood of seeking. So there's the two extremes that we're talking about here. One is the cynicism or the doubting that makes us go like, I'm just going to go live my life. This isn't worth it. It's too remote. And if it takes me 10 lifetimes, fine. If it takes me 20 lifetimes, fine. Doesn't matter. I'm going to be happy. And there's nothing wrong with being happy, of course. I mean, there's no counter argument to that. It's just that there is this opportunity, and we can seize the opportunity and move forward. Um, if we just put our attention in that direction and get our questions answered and our doubts resolved, and look at our experience. What is our experience? And then how can we get more experience? And I was blessed with the intelligence of nature, shall we say. It's not my intelligence, the intelligence of nature, to pursue enlightenment with great vigor, to make where I needed to make choices. For instance, to come here to Fairfield when I could have been out in the world making a lot of money, or at least a lot more money. And it sometimes involves making decisions, that uphold our evolution. So I hope that's inspiring, and I hope that helps clarify the questioning that we can do. And I'm sure you can think of other questions to ask, um, so that you become clear about what you're doing and what you're gaining, and feel good and feel happy, feel fulfilled in your spiritual progress. So with that, I think we will